And then there were two, y'all. Two jobs left. Two remaining head coaching vacancies in the 2024 coaching hiring cycle. Our Washington Commanders and the Seattle Seahawks. While there are two remaining jobs, there are a lot of qualified candidates in the musical chairs that is the 2024 hiring cycle, and probably the most impressive crop of guys we've seen on the coach cycle in years. I think there are two guys vying for these last two spots because the trend of this offseason and the trend that the NFL is going in, young, innovative guys, young, innovative offensive or defensive wizards. The old guard, the gatekeepers of the league, that is not the direction the league appears to be going in. And I think the top two candidates for these final two jobs are the trigger man, offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions, my guy, Ben Johnson, and the defensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens, the number one defense and number one ranked team in the league, Mike Macdonald. It's going to be a heavyweight fight between those two for these final jobs. And according to Adam Schefter, there are some who have viewed Ben Johnson as the presumptive favorite, in quotes, for the Washington job. But multiple sources tell him that may not necessarily be true. While Ben Johnson could get the Commander's job, he said his sources insist that there are other strong candidates, most notably Mike Macdonald, Anthony Weaver, Aaron Glenn, and Cowboys defensive coordinator Dan Quinn, who are still very much in play. I'll say this about that. If they really wanted Dan Quinn, he would have been hired last week. His team was put out very early in the playoffs, and they could have Dan Quinn signed, sealed, and delivered to Ashburn when Dallas got put out a couple weeks ago. It ain't Dan Quinn. Anthony Weaver, I love that we're interviewing him, and I think he's a qualified candidate. I think we need to remain in conversation with him because Anthony Weaver could get the defensive coordinator job here with the head coach that we're going to hire in the next week, because I believe it is still Ben Johnson. I think they're trying to build some anticipation, increase the drama over these last couple weeks as there are only two jobs left. We know Ben Johnson's coming to Washington, but if it ain't Ben Johnson, I think it's the guy we're looking at right here, Mike Macdonald, the head defensive guy over there in Baltimore. I think he's the defensive equivalent to Ben Johnson. This guy's been groomed by both Harbaughs. He worked for John Harbaugh twice in Baltimore, and he was the defensive coordinator for Jim Harbaugh's Michigan Wolverines the last couple years. This guy has been trained by two of the best in the business. His defense this year, he's getting the most out of everybody. He's managed to unbust Jadeveon Clowney. No pause necessary. He's managed to make Jadeveon Clowney look like the person he was drafted to be. He gets the best out of his talent. Guys like Kyle Hamilton, Justin Matabuke, guys are getting the best of their abilities shown in his system. He has the leader of men trait. It's crazy. Guys that are on the defensive side of the ball, it's like you're automatically tagged and tapped with leader of men ability, while offensive guys are seen only as masterminds. They can't have the ability as well. I think it's funny how we juxtapose those two. But Mike Macdonald, if you watched him mic'd up, if you watch how he communicates with players, he's clearly has the leader of men thing. He definitely feels like a coach that's older than 36 years old because he's hella qualified. He has so much experience, and the details in that defense, they scheme shit up. I don't think the NFC and AFC championship will win or lose either of these guys a job because their body of work already speaks for itself. And we've heard that Josh Harris has an affinity for the way that the Baltimore Ravens have built their team. We've heard it. We didn't bring in Joe Ortiz from their director of player personnel to come be our GM. We went with Adam Peters. Is Josh Harris still sniffing around the Baltimore tree? Is Josh Harris still one a Baltimore guy? Because we still got two options left from Baltimore. That's Mike Macdonald and Anthony Weaver. I don't think Weaver gets this head coaching job, but Weaver could very well be the defensive coordinator if and when we go Ben Johnson in the next week or two. It's going to get very interesting to see how these NFC and AFC championship games result, because I believe if the Ravens and Lions win and punch their tickets to the Super Bowl, since we already got a virtual interview with both guys locked in, we can get our second in-person interview with these guys this week. And I believe we can announce our intent to hire Mike Macdonald or Ben Johnson if their teams win, but we might not be able to make the hires until after the Super Bowl. We go back to last year when the Philadelphia Eagles played in the Super Bowl. Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon were unofficially putting their staffs together in Indianapolis and in Arizona the week before the Super Bowl last year, despite the fact that they couldn't announce it till around Valentine's Day after the Super Bowl was already played. So with all these new hiring rules that the NFL has implemented this year, it makes these process a little blurred, a little all over the place, and let's figure it out as we go as the weeks advance in the playoffs right now. It's a two-man race. It's a two-job race. Seattle versus Washington, Ben Johnson versus Mike Macdonald. I feel like Seattle wants to go a defensive guy. The clear candidate was Dan Quinn, who helped put together and implement the Legion of Boom there in Seattle, who put together a great team in Atlanta when he was a head coach, who should have won a Super Bowl if it was not for the 28-3 fiasco in Atlanta. So I could see why bringing Dan Quinn back makes sense for Seattle. But why get Dan Quinn when you can get the newer, improved, and much younger, 17 years younger version of Dan Quinn and Mike Macdonald of the Baltimore Ravens? But the kicker is Seattle didn't get an original virtual interview done with Macdonald, so they can't talk to Mike Macdonald this week. But Washington can. Washington plans to talk to everybody this week. We've already interviewed Raheem Morris in person, so after we interview Anthony Weaver or Aaron Glenn, we fulfilled our Rooney Rule portion of the hiring cycle, and we can now offer a job to someone. It's a very blurred situation, but it's down to two guys. Are we going the Ravens way and going Mike Macdonald, defensive mastermind and leader of men, or are we going offensive guru, trigger man from the offensive coordinator job of the Detroit Lions, Ben Johnson? I still, as we sit here on Championship Sunday, think it is 99.9% going to be Ben Johnson. It was always going to be Ben Johnson, and we're just going through the process. We're doing thorough vetting and due diligence. Like, I really appreciate this because I know Dan Snyder and how Dan Snyder would have mucked up this situation. He would have circled a guy and say, we're just interviewing a Rooney Rule candidate, and then we're going to get our guy. We're not going to go through the process. I like that we're speed dating the entire NFL. We're going to each table. We're buying everybody a blooming onion, a drink, and saying, tell me about the future we have together. Map out our lives together. Let me hear your pitch. We're dating all the girls in the room. And even though we got the one in mind, we know who we're going to end up going home with tonight. We're playing the field. I appreciate that because a man like myself, I like options. So I like that Josh Harris is facilitating and seeing all the options on the table. He's getting a little appetizer with all of them, but we know who's going to get this job at the end of the day. But if it goes a different way, I think the pick is no other than Mike Macdonald. If they wanted Dan Quinn or Bobby Slowick, they'd have the job already. They'd have it already because they've been available. They could have been hired last week. Washington and Seattle waited this long because they're waiting for the trigger man and the defense man to be done. They're waiting for them to be available. Point blank, period. This game of musical chairs ends in a face-off, a Mexican standoff between Mike Macdonald and Ben Johnson for the final two jobs of the 2024 NFL coach hiring cycle. Are we going the Ravens way, or are we going the offensive-minded trigger man? We're going to see very soon. Things are going to heat up in the next 24 hours when Washington boards the jet towards Motown City to talk to Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. And then we got interviews with Anthony Weaver and Mike Macdonald. But we don't have to go on all these interviews, though. But things get interested, things get dramatic, and I think Adam Schefter's report was to add to the suspense and the drama of the week to come for the Washington Commanders, because we just like hold the cards to these final two jobs. We're in the driver's seat. We're the captain now, and we are still seen as the most attractive destination for incoming head coaching options. That's all I got for right now. It is Championship Sunday. Chiefs, Ravens, Lions, 49ers. I'm going Chiefs, Lions in the Super Bowl. Could be wrong about both of them. Don't care. Don't have a dog in the fight. I just would like my next head coach, who I think is Ben Johnson, to have Super Bowl experience. And I cannot count out greatness when it comes to Patrick Mahomes. We'll see how those games play out. That's all I got for right now. Hail to the Washington Commanders. Like, comment, and subscribe. We're about 280 subscribers away from 10K subscribers on the channel, which is my next YouTube milestone. Help me get to 10K as soon as possible. Shit, let's try to get there before the Super Bowl. A bit ambitious, but I think it's very doable. Thank y'all for rocking with the channel. Hail to the Washington Commanders. Rio, out.